Thank you so much for coming this evening. This is the first ever Medill Talks. It is our attempt to express the great ideas that are born at Medill, and we are so lucky to have the help of Medill Undergraduate Student Advisory Council. I'm also advising you that this event is being recorded and will be available on the Medill website as well as on pointer.org. Stay tuned for those instructions. So thank you very much for being here. I want to introduce Taylor Shaw, a sophomore at Medill, who will introduce Randi Belisomo.
Good evening. Thank you. Okay, let's talk a little bit about Randi. Randi Belisomo is the co-founder of Life Matters Media. She is an accomplished multimedia journalist, currently serving as the general assignment reporter at WGN-TV in Chicago, where she began her career in 2005. She also serves as a contributor to Chicago Public Radio's channel WBEZ. She holds a master's degree from Medill, and she is also a Phi Beta Kappa graduate of the University of Notre Dame. Randi says, Medill gave me the gift of fellow students, colleagues, and professors that I count among my closest friends today. It also gave me the confidence to work in this city, knowing that my journalism fundamentals are sound. Those fundamentals were formed at Medill and remain with me every day in my professional life. I know my training was top-notch, and knowing that enables me to always set my sights higher. She is an Emmy nominee and a 2012 Peter Lassegor Award winner for Best In-Depth Series. She currently serves on the boards of the Chicago Headline Club, the Chicago Headline Club Foundation, the Association of Women's Journalists Chicago, the Chicago OpEd Project, and the Phi Beta Kappa Association of the Chicago area, and the Chicago End of Life Care Coalition. She's been doing a lot of work. She is a chairperson of the Carlos Hernandez Award in Meritorious Journalism at DePaul University and a member of the Columbia College School of Journalism Advisory Board. Randi travels regularly with Living Water International to help bring clean water to developing nations. She is a volunteer with Horizon Hospice. A native of Memphis, Tennessee, Randi makes herself at home on Chicago's Near West Side. Please help me in welcoming Randi Belisomo.
Thank you, Taylor. You got all the facts right, and that was the longest introduction I've ever had. Thank you. That was very nice of you. I am so honored to be here, and thanks to Northwestern and to my friend and colleague Michele Weldon for organizing this and elevating the conversation about the practice of journalism and looking forward, because this impacts me and my daily career and future career, and certainly the students here too, and the professors that are whose job is to think and consider that. And I'm very honored to listen to the ideas that will be shared tonight. As a Medill MSJ grad, I am very, very honored and pleased to be a part of the first Medill Talks, where great ideas take the lead, and where my faculty and the faculty demonstrate that they walk the talk. Many of these faculty were my instructors, and I am pleased to call them colleagues in our shared profession. We hope that you enjoy this evening's ideas from a select group of the journalism faculty sharing what they believe are the best ideas in journalism. Please join the discussion on Twitter. The hashtag is MedillTalks. We encourage you to do that and engage with our speakers later in the evening with a question and answer period. We've left about 15 minutes to continue this conversation, so let us get started. Did you know that stories affect us all deeply in physical ways that can be measured? Listen to Michele Weldon describe this phenomenon in Your Brain on Story.
In 1968, when I was 10 years old, I had my own newspaper, the Juvenile Journal. Before I had any preteen rebellion, I spent my spare time writing stories about my community, my family, my school, my neighborhood. I was the original Patch. I wrote the stories and typed them on an electric typewriter from the second floor study of my family's house on Jackson Avenue in River Forest. I copied the 4 to 6 page monthly newsletter in this hectograph contraption that was tabletop, and it involved carbon paper and a gelled surface. I had 50 subscribers who paid 50 cents a year for the privilege. I had a paywall. My craving and connection for story is biologically based. We are hardwired receptors of storytelling. As journalists, it is our job to understand that we connect to stories. I am not a neuroscientist, but the intersection between neuroscience, biology, and narrative story cannot be ignored. Your brain on story is different than your brain when receiving any other kind of information. We call stories, any morsel of content, a story, whether it is text, video, audio, graphic, or data. Stories are the Bitcoin of our profession, and their value varies widely. It is our responsibility as journalists to respect the power of story. In December 2013, researchers from Emory University had published a study about the neural patterns on subjects after reading a story. You've likely had or seen an MRI, and after reading a story, the left temporal cortex lit up. And these changes persisted not only for the duration of time for when reading the story, they persisted for several days. Changes were also part of the primary sensory motor region of the brain. This is the part of the brain that is responsible for what is called shadow activity. Neurons send messages that simulate body sensations. For instance, if you're reading or thinking about swimming, you may have the sensation of swimming because neurons are transmitting those messages. That is why when we read a story, we say, that made me feel as if I was there. In a separate study, Paul Zak, who is at the Center for Neuroeconomic Studies at Claremont Graduate School, took blood samples of subjects before and after reading a story about a terminally ill son and his father. The blood samples after reading the story showed significant increases in cortisol and oxytocin. Oxytocin is what is called commonly the bonding chemical, a human bonding chemical, or the empathy chemical. It is what is released in the bloodstreams of breastfeeding mothers. Now here's the stunning part about Zak's research. After reading the story, he asked the subjects to donate to a charity for terminally ill children. 80% complied. Can you imagine 80% compliance? Instructor, can you imagine? Or with your family? Now this is what has started a form of research called neuromarketing. And here at Medill and IMC, we are beginning an initiative launching that. At UCLA, at the Social Cognitive Neuroscience Center, Director Matt Lieberman said that humans' brains are wired for interaction. Jonathan Gottschall said, humans are creatures of story. At the Juvenile Journal, I told stories, but that was not great journalism by any stretch. My idols at the time were Brenda Starr and Lois Lane. Yes, they were fictional, but their career paths were not. I wanted to be a journalist. Other people wanted to be ballerinas, not me. I wanted to tell stories. When I was 12 years old, I started writing teen profiles for the local weekly Pioneer Press paper, Oak Leaves, near my house. I was paid $25 a story. Now that is roughly what my friends were making in about 50 hours of babysitting. Personal stories are at the heart of great journalism, and it is rewarded by Pulitzer Prizes each April. Personal stories are how we connect to figures in history. Anne Frank, Daniel Pearl, Trayvon Martin. Their stories make them cultural icons. Stories are why StoryCorps was formed. David Isay has now collected more than 90,000 stories from Americans around the country. We have been telling stories orally since the beginning of time. The ancient Greeks transcribed them, but it was not until the invention of the printing press in 1454 that our stories had a chance to become more permanent. The Bible was the first mass-produced content, which is little more than a collection of stories, moral lessons, and gospels. Similarly, the Quran is a collection of stories, verses, and lessons from God to Muhammad. Stories form the framework of our belief systems. Stories are how we navigate the world. But in journalism, a story must be more than a chronological regurgitation of events, more than a simple recitation of story. Story must achieve excellence, what Jack Hart calls storycraft. He's the former managing editor of the Oregonian, and he believes that excellence is the only way that we can achieve story. Ira Glass has 1.7 million listeners to each podcast each week for This American Life on National Public Radio. A Medill grad, he respects the power of story. He said, the power of an anecdote is so strong, it has a momentum in and of itself. And I love this quote because it's very Ira. He said, no matter how boring the facts are, if you have a well-told story, you feel as if you are on a train with a destination. Story is mere fairy tale if it does not meet the elements of newsworthiness. Now, man bites dog is a truncated, cliched way to express what makes news. This has the elements of timeliness, unusualness, impact, and consequence. What's lacking here, other than prominence and proximity, is the diversity factor. Because not just man bites dog is important, but also woman bites zebra and child bites alligator. Even dog bites man is an important story if it contains a human larger truth. Stories are contagious. That is what author Jonah Berger writes in his book Contagion. He says stories are the Trojan horse. You can carry any message as long as the story is the vehicle. It is similar to what Leo Tolstoy said when he expressed, art is an infection. The flip side of this craving for story, this seduction of story, the way that we connect to it, is that it turns some journalists into fabulists, fabricators, and plagiarists. We know the lessons of Janet Cook, Jason Blair, and Stephen Glass. They so well knew the power of story that they created story out of thin air. Recently, Gawker and BuzzFeed also published untrue stories. And Lara Logan, a great investigative journalist, told an untrue story about the Benghazi attack on 60 Minutes. This serves as a moral lesson and a reminder to us as journalists, we are not mere megaphones for other people's stories. We are keepers of the sacred trust. Virality is what we're looking for in content now. It seems every day there's a new app for how to make our stories go faster and farther sooner. But stories are the rocket fuel for every piece of content. The best ideas in journalism begin with a small story, but they do not end there. They have relentless verification, corroboration, and effort behind them. We must respect, as journalists, the lightning bolt of an anecdote and understand the power that it contains. Author and journalist Tim O'Brien said, stories are for eternity. Stories are connecting the past to the future. If we remember nothing else, when all memory is erased, we must remember the story. The Juvenile Journal folded when I was 12 years old. I was proud of my 2 years as publisher, the Catherine Graham of the western suburbs, and I told my father as much. I've done pretty well, I said to him. My father, and you recognize this, smiled and very patiently said, not exactly, Mish. You never paid me a dime for postage. I have a deep love of story. I have a long history with stories. Stories change us. As journalists, we must understand the power of story and know that it can change the world.